This guide covers all the actions the Reaper learns from level 71 to 90 in order. We go over how each action is meant to be used and recommend ways to use it when relevant. We also summarize the changes in the combat rotation at level 80. In the final summary, we outline an optimized opener and explain how it leads into the general rotation, alongside 2-minute burst considerations. We also touch on the stat priorities of the Reaper. I will assume you already know the basics of Reaper at level 70, and if not, you can view my Reaper starter guide to get caught up. I will also assume you are acquainted with common abbreviations like GCD, OGCD, and weaving, and if these abbreviations are unfamiliar to you, I have a short describing GCDs and OGCDs, and a short describing weaving. Now then, at level 72, you learn the ability Arcane Circle, which increases you and your party's damage for a while. You should make sure to use this on cooldown, and in your opener, simply weave it after your initial Shadow of Death. As a damage boosting buff, you may benefit from late weaving it. However, there is an interesting interaction in the opener at higher levels that means you may want to early weave it at specific times. We will get back to this later. At level 74, you learn the ability Regress. When you use Hell's Ingress or Egress, the one you didn't use turns into Regress, which allows you to teleport back to your original location if used within 10 seconds. As an example, this can be very handy to dodge a boss mechanic, use Harp, and then jump back in quickly afterwards. At level 76, you learn the ability Gluttony, which is a superior version of Bloodstalk and Grim Swathe on a minute cooldown. You should do your best to use Gluttony on cooldown, which can be done by using it immediately after every other soul slice, or by stockpiling soul gauge when the cooldown is coming up. Gluttony uniquely grants 2 Soul Reaver stacks, meaning you can, and should, use 2 Gibbet, Gallows or Guillotine back to back after it. Gluttony also takes priority over Grim Swathe on 3 or more targets, of course. For your opener, simply replace Bloodstalk with Gluttony, and then you can use both Gibbet and Gallows during an optional True North weaved after Shadow of Death. At level 78, Soul Slice and Soul Scythe become able to hold 2 charges. This means you can be a lot more laid back about spending these exactly on cooldown, and, if you like, you can even hold on to 1 charge to keep ready for Gluttony whenever. Aside from a massive quality of life boost, this doesn't change much. Extend your opener by using the second Soul Slice after your 2 Soul Reaver stacks are spent, and then use Bloodstalk and another Soul Reaver attack. At level 80, you unlock the Shroud gauge and unlock the Enshroud ability, assuming you completed the job quest line. Do your job quests. Gibbet, Gallows and Guillotine each now produce 10 Shroud gauge on use, and Enshroud spends 50 to fill your Lemure Shroud stacks up to 5. While enshrouded, which lasts up to 30 seconds or until you're out of Lemure Shroud, Gallows, Gibbet and Guillotine are changed to Cross Reaping, Void Reaping and Grim Reaping respectively. Each of these actions cost 1 Lemure Shroud to use, and similarly to Gallows and Gibbet, Cross and Void Reaping enhance each other, so make sure to alternate them. They also have a shorter GCD of 1.5 seconds, so get ready to act a bit faster. Finally, Cross and Void Reaping don't have positionals. At this level, you simply use Cross or Void Reaping and then alternate until you're out of Lemure Shroud. On 3 or more targets, you instead just spam Grim Reaping 5 times in a row. Take note that during Enshroud, only the following attacking actions can be used, and all other attacking weapon skills and abilities are disabled: Shadow of Death, Whirl of Death, Harp, and the Enshroud specific attacks. This becomes important at max level for aligning bursts, which we will get to at that point in the guide, of course. Due to how the Shroud gauge takes a while to fill, you can delay the use of Enshroud for a long time, searching for a good time to use it. The optimal choice is alongside other raid cooldowns like Arcane Circle, but to start, just try to make sure you use it at a time where you know you can use all 5 Shroud stacks. And remember that you don't have to use it immediately upon gaining 50 gauge. I also recommend planning your Enshrouds such that they don't force you to delay Gluttony if possible. Since level 70, Regress is introduced as a way to add to your mobility, and Gluttony and the extra charge of Soul Slice helps to improve your burst while also relaxing the strictness of using Soul Slice on cooldown. Arcane Circle is introduced as a raid cooldown and your only temporary damage buff, which you want to use on cooldown as well. Enshroud is also added to finally have a big burst option that your rotation culminates in. However, due to the time it takes to build up to, it is typically not available in your opener. This changes your opener as follows. If possible, use Harp as the tank runs up to the target, then use Hell's Ingress to close the gap. Use Shadow of Death and weave True North and Arcane Circle. Then use Soul Slice weaving Gluttony, followed by Gibbet, then Gallows, then Soul Slice weaving Bloodstalk, and then another Gibbet. When you have 50 Shroud gauge, try to plan it so that you can use it during buffs from other party members, or at the very least, while you can make use of the full Shroud while not delaying Gluttony if possible. Note that Shadow of Death is still available during Enshroud, so should you accidentally enter this without Death's Design, you can fix it during the buff. At level 82, you learn the spell Soul Sow, which is instant outside of combat but has a long 5-second cast time while in combat. Using Soul Sow replaces it with Harvest Moon, a very powerful ranged AoE attack, which you can use once before it turns back into Soul Sow again. Whenever you are not in combat, use Soul Sow to prepare Harvest Moon. Preferably, you want to find a good time to use Harvest Moon in every fight, as it is significantly stronger than your normal filler attacks. Soul Sow is only worth casting in combat if there is no target to attack at all. Casting Soul Sow and then Harvest Moon takes 3 GCDs, and Harp deals the same single target damage as Harvest Moon in 2 GCDs. The specific scenario where using Soul Sow is better than Harp while you also cannot be in melee range to do something better is so specific that it can reliably be assumed to not happen. At level 84, you learn the trait Enhanced Arcane Crest, which adds an AoE healing over time component to Arcane Crest if the shield is broken by damage. With this trait, you should try your best to use Arcane Crest whenever unavoidable damage presents itself, both for yourself and for your party, since the healing is for everyone. Furthermore, positioning yourself in a more central position for your party increases the chance that everyone gets to benefit. You also learn a trait which increases your 1-3 combos potencies by 20, 40 and 40 potency respectively. This does not change how you use it at all though. At level 86, you unlock the Void Shroud, as well as Lemure's Slice and Lemure's Scythe as an alternative for 3 or more targets. These 2 attacks replace Bloodstalk and Grim Swathe during Enshroud. Spending Lemure's Shroud stacks now also produces Void Shroud stacks, and you can spend 2 Void Shroud stacks to use either Lemure's Slice or Lemure's Scythe. This means that you can use 2 of these per Enshroud. Since these attacks, like their regular counterparts, are abilities, you should make sure to weave them between the reaping attacks. Keep in mind that once the 5th Lemure's Shroud stack is spent, you immediately drop out of Enshroud and lose all remaining Void Shroud stacks you might still have. So it is important to get these spent in time. Aside from making your Enshroud slightly more busy, this addition does not really change your rotation beyond that. At level 88, Arcane Circle is upgraded to grant the Circle of Sacrifice buff to everyone affected. Each player, including yourself, that uses at least 1 weapon skill or spell in the duration of 5 seconds grants you an Immortal Sacrifice stack, up to a total of 8, 1 from each player. You also learn the weapon skill Plentiful Harvest, which as it is does an impressive amount of AoE damage, but for each Immortal Sacrifice stack increases its potency slightly. More importantly though, Plentiful Harvest also immediately grants 50 Shroud gauge, enabling you to Enshroud immediately. This of course has a significant impact on your opener and rotation. Once Arcane Circle is activated, it will take around 6.7 seconds before you can even use Plentiful Harvest. As such, if you early weave Arcane Circle, it will be possible to use Plentiful Harvest after 2 more GCDs. However, this is only possible if you have next to no skill speed. A GCD faster than 2.47 will cause significant issues. If you instead late weave it, you will have to wait 3 GCDs. However, this is consistent regardless of your skill speed. This means that if you have next to no skill speed, it is recommended to early weave Arcane Circle after the first Soul Slice, meaning you late weave Gluttony. If you have more skill speed, instead late weave Arcane Circle after the initial Shadow of Death as previously stated. Adjust your opener to use Plentiful Harvest after the second Soul Reaver attack, followed by jumping straight into Enshroud. After the opener Enshroud, you can use the second Soul Slice and then move into the general rotation. The introduction of Plentiful Harvest also enables a reliable double Enshroud strategy for the 2-minute burst, which I will get into for the final summary. You can, however, use this just as well at level 88. Take note that you want to make space for the 50 Shroud gauge produced by Plentiful Harvest before using it, although you do have 30 seconds to use it. At level 90, you learn the spell Communio, which can only be used during Enshroud and for that reason requires at least one Lemure Shroud to still be present. Using Communio immediately ends Enshroud, so it is considered the finishing move of Enshroud. This means you should use 4 Reaping attacks and 2 Lemure actions and then Communio in every Enshroud. To round off, let's first talk about an opener followed by general rotation, as well as how this works with the 2-minute burst. And finally, let's briefly touch on stat priorities on gear. Take note that while Reaper has an alternative opener that delays Gluttony in favor of cramming the Enshroud window in 1 GCD sooner, which can be better for raid buff alignment, we will be focusing on the more generally applicable and intuitive one that uses Gluttony first, as it is more flexible in terms of skill speed. Let's begin. Make sure that Soul Sow has been used. Then, 3 seconds before combat starts. If your GCD is faster than 2.47 and you intend to use a tincture, a so-called burst potion, this is a great time to do so. Then, 2 seconds before combat starts, cast Harp and then either run up to the boss or use Hell's Ingress to close the gap. Then use Shadow of Death, and if you intend to use a tincture and your GCD is 2.47 or slower, this is a great time to do so. If you don't intend to use a tincture, you can instead optionally choose to use True North to help with the upcoming positionals. Take note that you cannot do both due to tincture's weirdly long animation lock. If, on the other hand, your GCD is faster than 2.47, instead late weave Arcane Circle here. Then use Soul Slice, weaving Arcane Circle and Gluttony, or just Gluttony if your GCD is faster than 2.47. Then use Gibbet, Gallows, and then Plentiful Harvest, weaving Enshroud. Then perform 4 Reaping actions and 2 Lemure actions and finish with Communio. Then use Soul Slice, weaving Bloodstalk, and finish the opener with another Gibbet. This then leads to the general rotation. The Reaper rotation is more like a list of priorities than a fixed rotation, given by its less frantic and more calculated nature. First, you want to make sure that Death's Design is active on your target, and extending it beyond 30 seconds in duration can be prioritized lower than most of your other cooldowns. Second, it is crucially important that both Arcane Circle and Gluttony get used as close to on cooldown as possible. With regards to Arcane Circle, when performing the 2-minute burst optimally, it includes 2 uses of Shadow of Death, and so, you can let Death's Design drop dangerously low if Arcane Circle is coming up soon. A rule of thumb is to keep Death's Design's duration below Arcane Circle's cooldown outside of burst situations. Next, you should make sure to keep at least 50 Shroud gauge in stock for the 2-minute burst, and any Shroud gauge beyond this can be used for extra filler Shroud gauges. With no skill speed and no downtime, you will generate enough gauge for 3 Enshrouds per 2 minutes, including the one granted by Plentiful Harvest. 2 of them will be spent during your 2-minute burst. Make sure to have less than 90 Shroud gauge when Gluttony is about to be ready, to be able to effectively use it on cooldown. Remember that Enshroud takes around 9 seconds to complete at its fastest. So consider venting Shroud gauge before Gluttony reaches 9 seconds of cooldown. Make sure to keep Soul Slice's cooldown spinning, but take note that the second charge has lower priority than most other cooldowns and can be kept around until an opportune moment presents itself. Harvest Moon is your strongest filler attack, but it is incredibly powerful for a lot of situations, so maximizing the moment you choose to use it is important. The best time to use it is when you're out of range to use melee actions. However, if a later opportunity for AoE is guaranteed, then using Harp and saving Harvest Moon for AoE can often also be beneficial. Try to be creative with this action, as the best time to use it can vary greatly between fights. When nothing else takes priority, fill with 1-2-3 combo steps. The start of your 2-minute burst is signified by Arcane Circle's cooldown being at or below 9 seconds, and all you need to perform it is 50 Shroud gauge. Let's take a look at the double Enshroud 2-minute burst. When Arcane Circle's cooldown drops below 9 seconds, perform either Soul Slice or a 1-2-3 combo step, and weave Enshroud. Then use 1 Reap, followed by Shadow of Death, leaving a gap to use a tincture in if you like. Then another reaping action, followed by Shadow of Death again, and then weave Arcane Circle. Then reap, Lemure, Communio, and then use Plentiful Harvest and immediately Enshroud again, performing a normal Enshroud window. After this second Communio, if you used a 1-2-3 combo step to initiate the burst, you must do one more step now or the combo will fade. If you don't have a combo going, either weave Gluttony after Communio or use Soul Slice followed by Gluttony after Communio. The reason why we start the first Enshroud by using 2 Shadows of Death is both because it is an opportune time to extend this effect, but also because it is the only reliable weapon skill we can use in Enshroud that doesn't spend Lemure stacks itself. And we want to stall 5 seconds of the cooldown of Enshroud such that we can do them back to back once Arcane Circle is active. Now, for AoE adjustments, use the AoE 1-2 combo as a filler in place of 1-2-3 combos on 3 or more targets. Also replace Soul Slice with Soul Scythe, Bloodstalk with Grim Swathe, Gibbet and Gallows with Guillotine, and Shadow of Death with Wall of Death. In Enshrouds, use Grim Reaping and Lemure's Scythe, but continue to finish with Communio. The main optimization for Reapers on AoE is that if you are in a single target fight that has moments where you need to move away from melee range, but the fight also introduces extra targets at some point, you may want to hold Harvest Moon for this moment to get more damage out of it. As Gluttony and Plentiful Harvest both deal AoE damage, these should be used equally in any encounter. On 2 targets specifically, as long as some of your incidental AoE damage hits both enemies, it is worth using Whirl of Death over Shadow of Death. Finally, regarding stat priorities, take note that in nearly every single case, item level beats out optimal secondary stats. This means you should always prioritize gear with higher item level, as long as it has strength on it. After that, Reaper's stat priority is Critical Hit, then Determination and Direct Hit. Determination and Direct Hit are almost identical in value, with Determination being a tiny bit better, so given the choice between the two, it should be preferred. Reaper's Opener has a very awkward relationship with skill speed, and the rest of the rotation does not benefit much from it either. However, skill speed amounts that lead to a GCD above 2.47 are beneficial. Assuming your gear has no skill speed on it, you can reach a beneficial 2.49 GCD with a single grade 10 skill speed materia, which is recommended. Should you find more skill speed on the gear you have, then this is not a disaster though, as skill speed is simply less good than other stats. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me and my channel, you can like the video, leave a comment, subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when next I post a video. And if you want to give even more support than that, you can also become a member of the channel like these wonderful people here. Fun fact, in the first patch of Endwalker that included job adjustments, Dancer's standard finish and technical finish were changed to be considered weapon skills. This does nothing for the Dancer, but it does mean that these attacks count for the sake of Circle of Sacrifice. You could say that Dancer was adjusted to buff Reaper.